All right, let's talk about this from Minnesota's perspective, because in the immediate aftermath of this deal, the messages I got from different league types was some version of this is about money. Karl Towns has a big contract. The last year of his contract, he was due to be paid $61 million. You look at those books in Minnesota, Anthony Edwards, big bump after an all-NBA season. Rudy Gobert's got a big contract. Mike Conley just got extended. Like, that's a franchise that is faced with a big tax bill in this coming year and the years ahead if they held on to Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, in Minnesota, some of the spin that you get from people there is, look, we just got a little more versatile in our backcourt. We can play Naz Reid in a bigger role. He's ready for more. He's ready for a breakout type of year after being sixth man last year. Julius Randle, Chris Finch is the Randle whisperer for the 1 year that he had with him. He'll find a way to make it work alongside Rudy Gobert. I haven't found a way to buy that yet, Fred. I really haven't, because even though Towns sucked in the conference finals against Dallas, save for like one decent game in game 4, he was really good against Phoenix, and they don't win that series against Denver without him because he made shots and he defended Nikola Jokic in a credible way. So I do not believe that they got better. It's not a slight on DiVincenzo. It's not a slight on Julius Randle. It's just that I think Karl Towns made more sense with that team than either of these two guys do. And frankly, you could be looking at one guy, DiVincenzo, and that draft pick if Randle doesn't agree to an extension. And I'm not sure why he would, or why Minnesota want to pay him real money when they're eligible to do that this year. I mean, would you really want to pay like a 30-year-old Randle 4 years, $180 million he's eligible for, or some variation of that? Like,
yeah, it's actually less now because of the extended trade rules.
Yeah,
so now that even mucks up his extension even more, because now it's like 3,109. And so it really complicates the whole situation for them long term.
Yeah, I just wouldn't. That feels like too odd a fit anyway. That I just like the Knicks had some issues with, what they'd be willing to pay Randle over the long term. I think Minnesota is going to have the exact same type of issue. So look, maybe the dust hasn't settled on all this. I mean, Tim Conley's as smart as they get when it comes to general managers. Now he has a pretty good draft pick. This, protected Pistons pick is something that he can use to deal. And he's got some movable contracts on that roster. But right now, you're just not going to convince me, Fred, that the Timberwolves got better. I still think they're a good team, top 4 in the Western Conference, but I think they took a step back. We can debate how big a step back, but I think this trade takes them a little bit further back in that conference. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people are looking at Randall's or Gobert and Randall's fit in kind of the inverse way that I'm looking at it. Whereas I think people are looking at it as like Gobert is a rim diving center and he's going to take up the middle and they're going to use him to weaponize offensive rebounding. And how's that going to mesh with Randall? It's like, we know how that's going to mesh with Randall because Julius Randle just spent 5 years playing next to Mitchell Robinson, who is even more rim reliant than Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert will go into dribble handoffs and can pass a little bit and operate in the high post in certain sets and that kind of stuff. Whereas Mitchell Robinson, like if you go on some teams, advanced stat with the crazy second spectrum cameras and all that, and you have them calculate which center spends the highest which player in the league spends the highest percentage of his time on the floor on offense with at least 1 foot in the paint. I bet you Mitchell Robinson is number 1 in the league in that stat. I bet you, because it's not just about like the fact that he's not a threat away from the rim. It's also because he might be the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. And the Knicks want to weaponize that. So the Knicks keep him close to the rim. And we've seen Julius Randle make 3 All-Star teams and 2 All-NBA teams in 4 years while playing with that guy at center. And so I'm not nervous about Julius Randle's production. I wonder about how Rudy Gobert offensively is going to adjust when he's getting swarmed on the roll, when you're running a pick and roll with Rudy Gobert. What became the running joke about Rudy Gobert when he was in Utah, all the screen assists, but it's a real thing. Rudy Gobert will get guys open as a screener, but how's that offense going to adjust when it's easier to help off of McDaniels or easier to help off of Julius Randle now than it was with Cat, who's one of the best, forget about 7-foot shooters in the league, just one of the best shooters in the league. I wonder how that offense overall is going to adapt. How is Anthony Edwards going to adapt when you have a guy who you're comfortable helping off of at the 3-point arc. Even though Randall will take threes when he has them, he's at his best inside the 3-point arc. And so I'm curious to see how they manage that. Now, I do think they have a strong argument as the deepest team in the league. They've got the reigning six man of the year, who I didn't have a vote last year. I would have voted for Naz Reid as six man of the year.
I did.
Deserving,
Yeah.
Deserving six man of the year. And I think I could make a really good argument right now that Naz Reid is not their best bench player. I think you can make the argument that Dante DiVincenzo is a better player than him. So you want to sit here and tell me they have literally the two best bench players in the NBA? I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that argument. Like, Ant is only getting better. That dude is going to be really good. Gobert is still going to anchor a defense. Gobert and McDaniels is still probably the most dangerous pick and roll defensive combo in the NBA. I don't know if there's anyone I want to run a pick and roll against less than that. And Ant is only getting better defensively too. I still think they're going to be a monster defensively. They really have a chance of being the best defensive team in the league for the second year in a row. And they're deep. They're going to win a lot of games, but I'm with you. When it comes to the playoffs, I think their spacing could be a problem. I think their 3-point proficiency could be a problem. And maybe Ant is just so good that he'll just take him to the conference finals again anyway. Like I'm not ruling that out, but I do think in the short term they are probably worse off for this deal, if only just for stylistic reasons.
And I just wonder too if they needed to do it now. Like, they probably needed to do it eventually, because I don't know if it was feasible to have a Towns contract on the books, the Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Anthony Edwards, even if a Gobert gets an extension, like, that's just a lot of money. And the NBA has found ways to force teams not to spend that particular money with all the levers that they have out there. But like, they got to the conference finals. Like, don't you want to see what this team can do with that experience? Like, don't you want to see if they can grow from it? Don't you want to see them run it back one more time with this group? Because now, yeah, they probably are deeper, but you're trying to incorporate Randall. You're trying to incorporate DiVincenzo. You've also got Randall in a kind of quasi-contract year, and you never know how that's going to go. It could turn out great, because he plays really well in his contract year, and maybe he's a 40% three-point shooter again. Who knows? But it could also go the other way, where it's like he's trying to get some numbers, and he's trying to make sure he puts up enough production to get that next big contract. They just introduced a lot of uncertainty into this team, and I just wonder if this time next year we're talking about, was it necessary? Like, could they not have brought this group back and seen if they could make a run? They certainly have the talent to do it. I mean, like, they're as talented as Oklahoma City. I think Denver losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope took a step back. Dallas is out there, but they're not infallible, right? Like, the experience that those guys gained from that conference finals, I just would like to see him do it one more time, especially when, like, what does Mike Conley have? One or two more, like, really good years left in him. I mean, the guy's not ageless, even though he's looking like it, last couple of years. Like, it just feels like they're blowing up or they're closing their window unnecessarily for financial reasons, when right now they really didn't have to.
Right. I mean, I agree with you. I think their argument is probably that they're opening up their financial window, and that Ant is really young, and that if you put yourself into the second apron, it's less about the luxury tax spending. For so long, it's less about the luxury tax spending and more just about the resources that you lose now when you're past that second apron. And if they're not good enough, then they don't necessarily have those resources, the exceptions, the ability to make most types of trades, sign buyout guys, all that kind of stuff. They don't have that in order to improve. But I agree with you. I also dislike this trade I consider myself very analytical in the way that I am a reporter, but I'm not a fan of the NBA. I haven't been in a very long time, because you can relate. You just lose it when you're a reporter covering the league, right? Like, you lose it. It becomes my love for the game has only enhanced, but it's different. Like, I'm not a fan. I'm not rooting for anything other than maybe like not a triple overtime game, so I'm not home too late. Like, I have no emotional investment in what's going on. But I am a huge baseball fan, and that sometimes I use that as a way to remind myself of what it's like to root for sports because I still have that in me as a huge, ginormous Yankee fan who's never covered baseball and never wants to cover baseball because of that. And the thing that I hate the most about this trade is that for both sides, there was a huge kind of romanticized what if. This was the first Wolves conference finals appearance in 20 years. This was the best Wolves team, maybe ever. You could argue it. It's certainly top two Wolves team ever. And
Yeah,
they
the
seem to
KG,
be on the
Sprewell,
rise.
Cassell, that was it. That's the only
Yep.
comparison.
And on the other side, and you know what? You look at that '04 team and you're like, man, that was Cassell and that was Kevin Garnett and like Sprewell had a good year. And then you're like, who else was on that team? Like that team didn't have that many guys. And you look at the other side and the Knicks traded for OG Anunoby on New Year's and then went 12-2 in their first 14 games after acquiring him when they were fully healthy. And then Julius Randle dislocates his shoulder and is out for the year. And then Anunoby gets hurt. Mitchell Robinson, it's just they start dropping like flies and they just don't have their guys. And if I were a Knicks fan, I'd have been really excited to see like, man, that group that absolutely demolished the league. And it was not a fluky 12-2. Like they beat Minnesota in that run. They beat Philadelphia by 36 in Philadelphia with Philadelphia fully healthy. They beat Denver at home by 38. Like that was not a fluky run. They were playing unbelievable basketball and it just passed the eye test in every single way. It passed the smell test in every single way. And if I were a Knicks fan, I would have been like, I want to see what this group can do. Like I think Knicks fans fell in love with the scrappiness of that team last year. And it's kind of just a big what if now. And yeah, I think you can make a really good argument the Knicks got better, even though financially now the Knicks are in a situation where they're way less flexible than they were before. Like this better work because next year they're going to have their top seven is under contract for $189 million. And the luxury tax line is $188 million. So just their top seven is driving them into the luxury tax. So they're in a situation where like this better work. And I think you can make the argument the Knicks got better. And you could sway whatever argument you want about how it helps the Wolves long-term flexibility. But just like if I were a fan of either of these teams, I don't think it's wrong to think like, I wanted to see what they could do. Like they were on the precipice of something really cool potentially. And I wanted to see that. And they don't get to see that now. And I think it's perfectly natural and should be encouraged to have that sort of romanticized feeling with sports, which like this is such an unromantic trade, isn't it? On both sides. It's so transactional.
Yeah, it really is. Let me ask you one last thing about the Knicks. Even before this trade, it seemed like they were trying to build a Boston-proof team. You bring in Mikal Bridges, and that's another wing defender that you can throw at Tatum, Brown, and Holiday, and all the wings that the Celtics got. Now you bring in Karl-Anthony Towns, who is far better equipped to defend Kristaps Porzingis, who torched the Knicks in the regular season last year. It just seems like they're building a team to match up with Boston in the playoffs. And maybe that's the smart thing to do because the Celtics are going to be the team at the end of the day that's there, right? It may not be the fastest of starts for the Celtics while they get over some stuff, but you get to April and more likely than not, they're going to be clicking again. You're going to have to go through them one way or the other. Do you think it's smart to be building a team to beat one specific team in the postseason?
Yes, if you do it the right way. Look, I think we saw, for example, Minnesota build a team to beat Denver, right? Where they had such a fantastic defensive game plan against Denver where you could guard Jokic with Cat and you could use Gobert as kind of that roaming help defender. And when Jokic pivots into the paint, he's got Gobert waiting for him there and it worked and they ended up winning that series. And then they got run out of the gym by Dallas.
That's the flip side of the coin, right? Like they built the team to beat Denver and didn't have the right team match up with Dallas.
Yep. And so I think what the Knicks were trying to do is like, there is no question. They were like, you can't beat Boston if you don't have a ton of wings. But I think what the Knicks are trying to do is they were really trying to have a team that could play every way. And I think that's how they looked at it. And then when Mitchell Robinson goes down and they don't have a center, they're like, damn, we don't have a team that can play every way right now. We just don't have a big. We're not good enough on the boards, not good enough from a rim protection standpoint. For what it's worth, I I don't know if they're done or not. I don't know if this is the roster they're going to enter the playoffs with, but I can tell you it's not the roster they're going to try to enter the playoffs with. Like they're going to try to get something else done before the deadline. And I don't know what that's going to be. They can try to use Mitchell Robinson's $14 million salary to try to get something. They can offer pick swaps, first round swaps in 2026 and 2030. They can throw second round picks in there. You could Deuce McBride, we discussed, is on a phenomenal contract. They've just proven that the Villanova guys are not automatically indispensable because they just traded Dante DiVincenzo. If you have another opportunity to get a fantastic player, who knows who they could throw into a deal. But I think they're going to be aggressive in trying to improve the roster that they have right now, like specifically for this season. They want to be all in on this season. And I think what they're going for more is we want to be able to play big. We want to be able to play where OG Anunoby guards fives. We want to be able to play where Cat guards fives. We want to be able to play where Mitchell Robinson guards fives. And we want to be able to play with a lot of shooters. And we want to be able to play with just like Precious Achua at the 4 and Anunoby at the 3 and Bridges at the 2. And you just have massive size. And normally if you've got size, you've got skill, you've got shooting, and you've got physicality. Those kind of hold up against everybody. And I think that's pretty much what they were going for. We'll see if they had it. I don't think they're as good as Boston. I don't think anyone's as good as Boston, but I think that was more, it was less like we're looking at Boston and we're just trying to beat Boston, and more like in order to beat Boston, you need to be able to play every way, because Boston is just going to play 5 out with Porzingis and they're still going to be able to protect the rim, and they're going to have phenomenal team defense, and they're going to drive and kick until they completely break you apart over and over and over again. They're going to shoot a ton of threes and whatever else. And they wanted to be able to have a team that could match that. But in order to do that, like, they need someone to guard Embiid too, you know?